Japanese stocks surge as a low yen boosts export-heavy commodities. US dockworkers strike threatens to cripple nearly half of the nation's ocean shipping. And we examine the measures cocoa farmers in Cameroon are taking to safeguard their crops amid rising thefts. Hello, I'm Toba Aydin with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. Japanese stocks led Asian markets higher on Thursday. The Nikkei 225 opened 2.57% higher, while the broad-based topics added 2%. The Japanese yen depreciated to around 147 to the dollar, hitting a one-month low and boosting shares of export-heavy commodities. It comes as Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said economic conditions don't currently support another rate hike after meeting with Bank of Japan Governor Kazuo Ueda. The Bank of Japan kept its benchmark interest rate steady at around 0.25%, the highest rate since 2008 in September. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index fell 3.3%, coming off a strong session on Wednesday when the index closed more than 6% higher after hitting a 22-month high. Mainland Chinese markets are closed for the Golden Week holiday. Let's get more on this now with Josh Mahoney, Chief Market Analyst at Scope Markets. Good to see you, Josh. Now, firstly, what's behind Prime Minister Ishiba's dovish comments? Markets had been betting on a rate hike by the end of the year.
Yes, the fact that we've seen Ishiba come into this position where he's going to be Prime Minister, but he was a surprise candidate. We expected him to come in second or third place. He ended up coming into power, and off the back of that, people have grown very fearful about some of the commentary that he had talked about previously about normalization of monetary policy. And normalization essentially means higher interest rates. Well, we did see some significant moves in the market off the back of that, with weakness in terms of dollar yen. That has been reversed, with the dollar yen currently trading at a one-month high. And that comes off the back of comments where he essentially said now is not the time for them to raise rates once again. I mean, look, he's talking about 2024, and we've only got 2 meetings left this year anyway, so there's still a good chance we do see further rate hikes in the future. But certainly, given the jitters we did see throughout global financial markets when they did point towards the possibility of a series of rate hikes, this sort of stable and slow approach to raising interest rates isn't necessarily too much of a surprise.
Now, we also have some fresh PMI data in Japan pointing to softer expansion compared to August. What does this suggest about the current state of the economy?
Yeah, so these were essentially final figures. We'd seen the first iteration of it. This was the final revision, and both services and composite, which essentially spans the entire economy, both saw weaker figures. Nonetheless, the composite reading is still well in expansion territory. It points towards a strong economy, but weakening somewhat. And it's interesting to note the differential between softer new orders when it comes to manufacturing, but strength within the services sector. That theme really is something that carries across the world, the likes of the US, the likes of the UK, similar kind of story. But certainly as we move forward, the Japanese economy does still stand in a decent position. The question mark here for businesses will be the trajectory of the Japanese yen. Of course, as you see the recent strengthening of the yen, so foreign earnings suddenly start to become devalued, and so people's products also become less competitive abroad. So it's unsurprising to see some jitters, but notable that the economy does still stand in a decent position in terms of remaining well above that 50 threshold on the composite PMI.
All right, Josh Mahoney, Chief Market Analyst at Scope Markets. Thank you very much as always. Now a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. Thousands of Argentinians have taken to the streets in a demonstration supporting the public university system, making it the second largest scale protest on the issue in 6 months. The protests come after President Javier Milei vetoed a law aiming at increasing funding for public universities. The decision has increased tensions surrounding his austerity measures amidst soaring inflation and rising poverty rates in the country. Tesla has reported its third quarter production and delivery numbers, revealing a smaller than expected increase. Quarterly deliveries reached 462,890 vehicles, marking a 6% rise year-on-year and a 4% increase from the previous quarter. To avoid an annual decline, the company now requires record-breaking deliveries in the fourth quarter. Following this announcement, Tesla stock declined 3% in pre-market trading. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, has received $6.6 billion in new funding, increasing its valuation to $157 billion. Investment firm Thrive Capital led the funding round, with Microsoft and Nvidia also participating. The investment is one of Silicon Valley's largest. OpenAI plans to use the money to improve its AI research and increase computing capacity. And Total Energies plans to increase its oil and gas production by around 3% annually until 2030. The company is focusing on liquefied natural gas with major projects. The energy giant highlighted the growing global demand for oil and the need for continued investment. Meanwhile, Total also aims to expand renewable energy with 70% from wind and solar. Its growth strategy seeks to reassure investors amid lower energy prices. After months of global supply chain disruptions due to the pandemic, it looks like another challenge is on the horizon for the US economy. From Maine to Texas, tens of thousands of dock workers have launched the first major strike in nearly 50 years, threatening to paralyze almost half of the country's ocean shipping. Omar Bakalolo has the story.
Imagine waiting longer than expected for a new car to arrive, or the shelves at your grocery store slowly starting to look emptier. This could be the reality for many Americans as a historic dock workers strike takes effect. Around 45,000 workers walked off the job after talks with port operators failed to progress. The International Longshoremen's Association says its members deserve better pay after years of corporate profits, especially during the pandemic.
What they need to do is pay these men and women a fair wage. They made billions and billions and billions of dollars, okay? All right, billions and billions and billions of dollars, okay? And during COVID, they ripped off the whole industry, they ripped the government off and every damn body else during COVID, okay? Now, we want them to pay back. They're gonna pay back.
But it's not just wages on the table. Workers are also fighting against increasing automation at ports, a shift they argue will hurt both their jobs and local economies.
As the last 6 years have demonstrated, automation cannot outperform the skilled men and women of the ILA. Automation of our nation's ports should be a concern for everyone. The truth is, robots do not pay taxes, they do not spend money in their communities.
The strike has shut down 36 critical ports along the east and Gulf coasts, threatening to bring over a third of U.S. trade to a standstill. Perishable goods like bananas, which account for 75% of imports through these ports, are at risk of spoiling. Meanwhile, auto manufacturers could face potential part shortages, as 4 of the nation's 5 largest car import hubs, including Baltimore, the country's biggest for auto shipments, are now closed. Experts warn the strike could cost the U.S. economy around $5 billion a day and may lead to temporary job losses for more than 100,000 people.
Many of the goods have to go through the East Coast and Gulf ports, and there really isn't a good alternative. And that's part of why the workers have a lot of bargaining leverage. They're going to put pressure not only on the management group that manages the ports, but many other companies rely on the ports to move goods in and out. And that reliance has increased substantially over the last 15, 20 years as global supply chains have expanded.
Over 200 business groups have sent letters to President Joe Biden, warning that a prolonged strike could deepen inflation and create further economic uncertainty. But the White House has so far struggled to push striking workers and business owners back to the negotiating table. With the US election just 6 weeks away, the impact of this strike could play a pivotal role in the race, especially if shortages begin to affect more and more voters. Ömer Bakkaloğlu, TRT World.
For more, let's bring in Maurizio Zanardi in Brighton in the UK. He's a professor of economics at the University of Sussex Business School. Good to have you with us. Now, how will the strike at East Coast and Gulf ports impact the broader US economy, particularly in terms of supply chain disruptions?
Well, the answer really depends on how long these strikes are going to last. Strikes of a few days, even a week, will not have much of an effect on the US economy, especially because these strikes were widely anticipated, which means that companies all over the US have taken contingency plans in increasing their stockage of intermediate inputs or final goods. And also, since we are approaching the Christmas period, it's already to be considered that most of the goods that are needed for our Christmas shopping have already arrived in the United States. So the question is not what will happen tomorrow or the day after when the people go for shopping or the companies need intermediate inputs, is more the medium long-term consequences. And that really is a question depending on how long is the strike going to take. 1 week, 2 weeks, hopefully not than that.
And do you think this wage hike demanded by unions will lead to long-term solutions or further complicate negotiations?
Well, here it's really how you look at it. So there is a demand of a certain amount per hour that is estimated to be equal to an increase of 70% over the period of 6 years of the new contract. The companies are offering something in the order of 50%. When you look at in terms of percentages, these are large numbers. And therefore, the calculation is also to be considered is the following. If indeed the salary increases this large are given, how much, in which other ways productivity can increase at these ports so that it remains profitable for the companies to operate these ports? And that brings into the picture automation. Automation is one way to allow salary increases while maintaining efficiency and profitability of the companies. So in a way, the more the workers are asking and the more on the back of the mind of the authorities is increasing the level of automation to make it possible to satisfy these demands. So it's really a difficult trade-off to keep in mind.
And given the Biden administration's hands-off approach, how do you see the strike evolving in the coming weeks, and what role could federal intervention play?
Well, I think that here there is a difference between what you and I will be known to have happened and what is actually happening. So the Biden administration has said is not intervening because they want a fair solution to be found between the two sides. Something tells me that behind the doors, and something that no news channels will report, there are going to be talks, pushes, stick and carrots that the federal government is using to try to, first of all, to bring the two sides to a table and start talking from there. So I do not expect, as the Biden administration made it clear already, that they will openly intervene, but I'm sure that many people are busy in Washington, D.C. at the moment to try to facilitate a solution without imposing one solution.
Okay, Professor Maurizio Zanardi, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Cocoa theft in Cameroon is on the rise as global prices soar due to challenges in major producers like Ivory Coast and Ghana. With rising security concerns, many farmers are forming vigilante groups and adopting extreme measures to safeguard their crops and livelihoods. Nicholas Morgan has more.
Rising global cocoa prices, driven by poorer harvests in West Africa, have made these farms a lucrative target for thieves. Prices have tripled to over $2.5 per kilogram, turning cocoa into a highly valuable commodity. And that's forcing farmers like Pascal Mani to patrol his 7-hectare farm with a machete. For him, it's no longer just about money, it's about survival.
As a farmer, every day I check my field. Early in the morning, I get up and go around. Before bed, I go around again. I often see my workers too.
Communities here have now formed vigilante groups, using bows, arrows, and even charms to protect their crops from thieves. They hope the amulets will cast a spell, trapping anyone who dares steal their precious cocoa. But superstition isn't always enough.
Theft has become a major challenge for us, almost like a catchphrase that defines our daily lives. You can't go a whole day without hearing about theft because it affects all farmers.
In response, authorities have banned the sale of non-dried cocoa and are urging buyers to avoid unregistered sellers.
For us, we have many measures that we take when somebody brings cocoa here. First, we don't receive cocoa from little children here because little children will believe that they don't own farms. And then secondly, we don't receive cocoa from people who don't know. We have registered farmers here. So if you come here and you are new, we don't take cocoa from you. And thirdly, if you come here with dirty cocoa, we assume that somebody might have dried his cocoa somewhere you pass and picked.
Cocoa may be more valuable than ever, but the price these farmers are willing to pay to protect it goes beyond money. Nicholas Morgan, TRT World.
Let's get more on this now with Theo Achiampong, economist and political risk analyst in Accra in Ghana. Theo, now how are Cameroon's farmers coping with the surge in cocoa prices and the rising threat of theft of their crop?
Thank you very much. It's a very difficult challenge for a number of farmers, and in some respects, it's also to be expected, given that the prices on the global market have almost tripled in the last several years due to the drought conditions affecting farm output. And what that then has done is make cocoa a very lucrative business for a lot of thieves and vigilante groups and others to go into these farmers. In response, what we're seeing is a number of farms attempting to protect, a number of farmers attempting to protect their farms, and I've even seen instances or reports indicating that they're using arms and amulets to try and charm or ward people off from coming onto their farm. Others are using machetes and basic implements to try and prevent people from stealing their cocoa.
And what are the potential long-term effects of this theft crisis on both local communities and Cameroon's economy?
Yeah, for Cameroon particularly, cocoa is one of the major export earners for the country. And to the extent that this rise in theft keeps continuing or ongoing, what that means is potentially could dissuade some farmers from farming the crop, although I don't think it's going to be in the large or significant numbers. But it also would then mean you're likely actually to see more smuggling of cocoa across different border regions in search of a higher price. And ultimately, that all would actually affect the export earnings that the government gets to stabilize the economy.
All right, Theo Achiampong, economist and political risk analyst. We will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Turkey's premier technology and aerospace event Teknofest has opened its doors to visitors in the southern city of Adana. The 5-day event, starting on Wednesday, is set to feature competitions, air shows, exhibitions and workshops. İlyas Avcı reports from the scene.
World's largest aviation, aerospace and technology festival, Teknofest, is taking place in Adana, this time for its 10th edition this year, once again to inspire the youth in the respected region. The previous ones were in Izmir, Istanbul, Ankara, Antalya, and several other cities across the country. And the reason they make it like that is that they try to cover as much area as possible. They try to touch as many souls as possible to inspire them. I had a chance to speak to some of them actually, and they are very happy that they had won Technofest over here in Adana.
Technofest impressed me. I'm very excited. In fact, when it first came to Istanbul, I was thinking, I wish it would come to Adana too. And now it's here in Adana.
How do these kids get inspired? Well, there are competitions from 50 different categories, and they vary from bioengineering innovations, blockchain innovations, AI in transportation, rocket building competitions, and so on and so forth. And they are also seeing some cool shows. They're seeing fighter jet parades, combat drone parades. Actually, right over here, there is this TB3, Bayraktar TB3 version of the Baykar company, and it had its first ever public flight right today, along with the Turkish aviation industry's Anka 3 combat drone. It also had its first ever public flight. So when you put together words like Türkiye, aviation, skies, you cannot help but remember the famous saying of the country's founder, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the future is in the skies. And Technofest aligns perfectly with that vision of the country's founder, and it inspires the youth to enhance the country's position up in the skies.
Ongoing violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and a restriction of permits to work in Israel is pushing the economy to the brink of collapse. It's personal for many families whose breadwinners are left with no choice but to risk everything to find ways to feed their families. Selin Tutar has the story.
In the occupied West Bank, a struggle for survival unfolds. The economy is failing, and the situation is growing desperate. Jobs are scarce, and families have no choice but to seek work across the barrier in Israel, despite being banned from working there since October 7th. But crossing is not easy or safe. Every day, Palestinians make the harrowing journey for the promise of a job. Some hide in trucks, others slip through the holes in the barbed wire fence. If caught, they could be arrested or shot, like Allah's brother.
After October 7th, it became difficult to enter Israel. They prevented workers from the occupied West Bank from entering. There is no work here. He was unemployed. Yet, he has to deal with the living costs. He has a family and responsibilities. He has to go work in Israel because in the occupied West Bank, there are no opportunities. He had to go for work.
The World Bank warns that the occupied West Bank's economy may soon collapse. More than 300,000 workers have left the labor market, and the businesses there cannot survive. Roads and infrastructure have been destroyed by raids. Water and electricity networks are gone.
These raids and procedures by the Israelis resulted in destruction of infrastructure, roads, water networks, electricity networks, and destruction of houses. I mean the destruction of the economic infrastructure. It makes the environment in those districts not an acceptable form of existence.
The situation has only worsened since October 7th. The occupied West Bank's unemployment rate has skyrocketed to 32%. In the occupied East Jerusalem's Old City, more than 80% of businesses have closed their doors.
There are more than 200,000 Palestinian workers that stopped working from inside Israel. This is a fact and the result of the inability of the private sector to operate its institutions. It is working at less than 50% efficiency.
More than 700 Palestinians have been killed in the occupied West Bank since the war began. The violence will continue, and thus Palestinians are left with a difficult choice: stay and suffer, or risk their lives for a chance to provide for their families. They will keep crossing despite the dangers. It's a journey they must make, even if it may be their last. Selin Tutar, TRT World.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.